Hi, welcome to sunny Spain. We've come to drive this, the Aston Martin DB11 V8. What's different? Well, obviously, the clue's in the name. It's a V8 engine. Engine's been taken from Mercedes, their AMG division. It's delivering about 500 brake horse. It's a twin-turbo, 4-litre. We also know that the engine's capable of making a lot more power than that, because we've driven it in the AMG products, which have been producing the best part of 600 brake horse. So we can only assume that Aston have done this to keep it away from the V12. But don't go thinking that the whole powertrain's been lifted wholesale from Mercedes. Basically, this car's got an 8-speed automatic gearbox rather than the twin clutch that Mercedes uses. And also, this is a wet sump engine as well, whereas Mercedes tend to use the dry sump engine in their GT models. Visually, as you can see, there's not much difference between the V12 and this car. There are less vents on the bonnet with this car. There's only 2 as opposed to 4 on the V12. And it gets a bespoke set of alloy wheels. So aside from the subtle difference, if the two cars were sitting together, you'd be hard-pressed to tell the difference. But in terms of how they drive, well, that's a question we're about to answer now. So what we need to note about this car is, it's about £13,000 cheaper than the V12 for a start. But the biggest saving is the amount of weight in the car. The engine's actually about 100 kilos lighter than the V12. And also, because you've locked those front cylinders off the engine, the whole mass of the motor is further back inside the cabin. So the car should be more agile and easier to turn into corners. And that's immediately how it feels. The steering is very sweet indeed, actually. Turns in very nicely, and it returns to centre with the same kind of weighting. There's no inconsistency in it. If you think you're going to need a V12, actually forget it. This engine's very strong indeed. It's producing about 500 brake horse. Got loads of torque, so you can just drive it out the bottom. I have to confess, I've already driven the V12 engine. I drove it earlier this year, and I'm not a big fan of it. It's predominantly down to the rear end of the V12 car. It gets very light on you, it steps up over crests, and it has this lateral movement at the rear end of the car. This car is a totally different animal. It works so hard on the chassis. The rear end, the torsional stiffness has gone up exponentially. So the car sits now much better. You know, you can't get away from the fact that it's still the same platform. So it has a tiny bit of that kind of characteristic where it can get a little bit wayward at the rear end. But it's far more planted on the road, this car. So what have we learned here today? Well, what we have learned is, like so many other things in life, less is definitely more. This V8 car is so much lighter than the V12 car, so much more agile. It still looks absolutely fantastic, every bit as good as the V12. And you know what? It probably is the best Aston Martin we've ever driven.